breakfast puppies?
This podcast contains adult language and content and is meant for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, I'm Kevin Siembieda of Palladium Books, and you're listening to the Glitterbois.
Hey folks, it's just Jacob from the Glitterbois, and I and NPC are back with another conversation with Kevin. Kevin, how are you doing out there?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Pretty groovy.
Pretty groovy.
Yeah. Got no complaints right now.
Yeah. So last time we were talking about the super early days of Rifts and the development behind that, the thoughts, some of the sources in these, zeitgeist gestalt of pop culture that seems to drive a lot of ideas. And now we're going to be digging a little deeper in there and talking about more of where you went beyond those first three books. Like we talked about how it was going to, like you had a feeling that Rifts was going to be something significant, but you mentioned that like even you were kind of surprised at how big it went. One of the questions I have is when you realized that Rifts was going to be a big thing, were you as a company well positioned to take advantage of that, or was it suddenly scrambling to take advantage of the opportunity?
No, we were, it was really great timing. So we were very well positioned to take advantage of that. Back in the day, we had like 72 distributors, and we were coming off of Ninja Turtles, Robotech. In fact, I shouldn't say coming off of, because Turtles was hotter than ever. Robotech was hotter than ever.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just around that same time, 1990, we got the rights to do Macross 2,
Yes.
which kind of came out of nowhere.
Oh yeah,
we were doing the Robotech videotapes. So, yeah, we were rocking, man, and we were really at our height. So when Rifts came out and it just took off, it was just like, oh, man, this is fantastic. We've got, 3 super hits, mega hits, and, Fantasy and Heroes Unlimited and Beyond the Supernatural are all selling well, Ninjas and Super Spies. It was just like a peak time. And then Rifts, it was just so hot. I mean, the real problem we had with Rifts was just keeping up with demand. And it was so popular, and we'd get feedback in so that so some of my original concepts got a little derailed, because it's like, oh, people want more on juicers, or people want more on this or that. So let's try to give it to them, because we always listen to our fans and try to give them what they want. It may not seem like it sometimes, because circumstance it sometimes prevents our ability to get product out in a timely fashion, or when we originally projected. But back then, we were coming out pretty regular, and we were rocking and rolling.
Hell yeah. I mean, and everything that has come since, like you've got multiple dozens of world books.
Oh yeah.
A dozen plus dimension books. Like it just kept rocking.
Yeah.
Well, and back then, as Ryan Dancy used to call me, he nicknamed me the Machine. Because, believe it or not, I was pounding out 8 to 12 titles a year. And half of those I was writing completely on my own. So, yeah, I was a machine.
Do you feel that in that early batch, like we're talking the single digit still of world book numbers, is there any from that era that today, okay, Vampire Kingdoms excluded because we've already gushed over it. After Vampire Kingdoms, are there any from that day that you feel truly just capture everything that you wanted to do perfectly?
I think we already talked about it too, but Atlantis.
Oh yeah.
That just flowed out of me. I wrote that book in like 3 or 4 weeks. Kevin Long was amazed. He was like, holy cow. Because he kept asking me, so Kev, what's in Atlantis? And I'm like, I can't tell you yet. It's still percolating. And he's like, what do you mean it's percolating? And I'm like, it's in there, Kev. It's about to come out. And when I wrote it, it just poured out of me. Source book 1, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sourcebook 2, I was really thrilled with. Mindworks. I was really happy with Triax as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very close collaboration with me and Kevin Long. And then I loved Coalition War Campaign. I thought that came out pretty perfect. And then sort of the triumvirate, although I was only very, very involved in the first 2 of the 3 books, which is Lone Star, New West, and Spirit West.
That's my heart right there.
Yeah, you're hitting NPC's sweet spot. He's such a New West fan.
And then the Canada books were really great. Splin, Dimensional Market was great. We just had so much fun with all those books. But some just really sang more than others. I was always surprised that England did as well as it did, because that was one of the books that I didn't feel like really came across with what I had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
But people loved the hell out of it. We sold more than 100,000 copies of it. So obviously we hit the right chords.
Yeah.
But that was one of those books when it got done, I'm like, I don't know, it's good, but it wasn't quite, I think, what I had envisioned.
Were there any other books like England where what finally came out wasn't quite what had been percolating around in your head?
Not really.
Okay.
I usually have a pretty clear idea of what I want, and I get inspired by other people. So even people who sent in manuscripts that I would have to sit back and retool and rewrite or add considerably to, like Warlords of Russia and Mystic Russia. I had a blast on both of those books.
Yeah.
In fact, it wasn't originally a Mystic Russia. There was just Warlords of Russia was the manuscript. And as I had to go in and really work on that one, and as I delved into Russian mythology, I'm like, oh man, there's just so much cool stuff. It was very interesting. And Russia has been, like Poland, has been so influenced by so many different countries and cultures. It was just fascinating. Russian history is pretty fascinating. And I loved the sort of the blend of superstition and the supernatural. So the next thing I know, I'm writing Mystic Russia. Maybe Australia was a book that wasn't quite what I thought it would be. It's not bad. I like it. The art, some of the art in it's amazing. But I think that one fell a little short for me. And then I wanted to write like the dream time like section and really dive into the mythology, and much like I did with Mystic Russia. But somehow that just didn't happen. It's rare for me, but it was one of those things where I was all fired up on it when I announced it, and then it's like I got nothing, and I just kind of lost the fire. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I said, not very often with me, because pretty much everything gives me ideas. But on that one, it just kind of fizzled, and I suspect I just had other things that were, calling to me in a much more strong way. So
when you've got that many product lines going at once, I can totally understand that amount of like, my attention's over here, and now it's over here, now it's over here, and it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I kind of like bouncing around between the genres. Because again, everything gives me ideas. So I'm not one of those guys. I always think of myself more when people say, who are you like? When it comes to like filmmakers. And I always think I'm kind of like Steven Spielberg or Walt Disney, where I like to tackle a lot of different subject matters. Yeah. Spielberg would do amazing science fiction, and next thing you know, he's doing a war story or a historical story or Indiana frickin' Jones, and with his buddy George Lucas. And it's just I just love the wide range, and I get it, because for me, I hate just having to do one thing. I mean, if I got stuck where I had to just do riffs forever, I would be happy, because it covers every genre, so I can kind of. But I really like going back and doing horror or fantasy or superheroes. I love all that stuff.
So there's a couple of early books in the Rifts World Book lineup that a lot of people talk about, both on our Discord and on other Palladium forums and discussion groups that I've seen. And reactions are across the board on it for various reasons, but they happen to be two of my favorite books, and those would be South America and Japan. So on our show, we kind of haphazardly, pseudo-chronologically go through some of the Palladium books when we get to them, and we flip back and forth upon various lines, and we've only just made it up to, I think the next one we're going to do is South America 2, which I just read. And so, spoilers, that book gets a lot of reputation for being very, very, very overpowered. And I can agree with that one. But South America 1, I think, is pretty on point.
Yeah.
Like I was expecting to get some kind of like Power Gamers Paradise from all the rumors that people have talked about. And I was surprised. Like it seemed on point and had good factions with their feelings towards each other is one of the things I think Palladium does better than anybody else.
Thanks.
There are these groups here and they each want something and they have opinions, and a game master can take that and run with it. But Japan is chef's kiss. That is a fantastic book. In today's era, there's a greater awareness looking back upon the works of the last few decades and comparing them to higher standards of accountability and appropriation and, cultural respect. Japan holds up. It holds up very well. Like it's one of those books that you can easily look at through the lens of 2020s and think, this book was written in the 90s. It's probably a little racist. You never know. And then you read it, you're like, not at all.
Not at all. Nope.
Fantastic book. Like it is just, to me, it stands heads above a lot of other gaming books that were coming out at that time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, whenever I'm writing something in another part of the world, I try to represent their culture as accurately as I can. And I try to respect the people and their culture and their history. And I think you see that in Japan and Canada and the China books and most of the books that we do. I might have mentioned before, one of the greatest compliments I ever got was after we had done Canada, Rifts Canada. We get a call to office from a shaman, an Inuit shaman, and I'm like, oh shit. What did I do wrong? And oh God, please don't let me have offended someone, horribly. And it was a woman, and she was like, I just wanted to call and thank you because I don't agree with a couple of things that you did, but it's very accurate. It's one of the best representations of our culture I've ever seen, and I wanted just to call to thank you. And I'm like, oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
That actually leads into an interesting question because, again, you remembered Canada existed, which for so many role-playing companies is there's nothing north of the 48th of the parallel, But you didn't really mention Alaska a lot, did you? Why did you were up there in the Great White North? Did you decide to just stop at the mountain range and not go over into the peninsula and see where? Oh, I don't know. The Russians could meet with the Canadians.
Well, because I'm trying to keep some stuff open for future books. That's the same thing with the West Coast. some people have asked me, "Oh, do you hate California and Oregon?" And I'm like, no. Um, and yeah, it just I'm trying to save some stuff for later.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. So as Rifts developed, we started to slowly see media outside of the game books start to show up. Miniatures, novels, comics, video games. We almost had a movie. What started your brain turning towards that off the game table ideas for what you could do with the IP?
Well, it was really just, obviously we would love to do everything, and things like video games and movies are, for the most part, out of our wheelhouse. We need a third party to do those kind of things. And
But you're so good at those tapes.
That's right. But so those were all pretty much opportunities that came to us. And, we weighed and talked to the people and said, "Oh, yeah, we like these guys. We think they'll do a good job. Let's go for it." So, for example, in the collectible card game with Precedence Entertainment, the owner, Paul Brown, had reached out to us, and we talked and we worked up an agreement. Mark Friedman handled the actual creation of the licensing agreement. And we had met the two main game designers, Kevin Siembieda and Mike Hummel, and we loved them, and we knew they would do a great job. They really understood and loved Rifts. That's the main thing. When we license anything, we try to find someone who shares our love of the IP and will do a loyal adaptation. And I can't tell you how many things we turned down. For example, there was just a couple of years ago, we had a guy reach out to us from a comic book company, and he's like, "Oh yeah, we're doing really successful in this and that." And I had not actually heard of them. They're an independent company, but they're actually, doing a fair amount of stuff. And he's like, "Yeah, I would love to get the rights to Rifts for one of my writers. He's all hot on Rifts." And I'm like, "Well, send me an outline of what he has in mind, or have him reach out to me." And so the author sends me this outline, and one of these things where it's like, it's Rift's Earth 300 years beyond 109 PA, and I'm like, well, then it really isn't Rifts, is it? It's going to be some weird future Rifts that I don't think my fans are going to want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years before that, we had a comic book, again, independent comic book company reach out. They sounded great. They sounded nice. The royalty sounded really excellent. And then we saw some of their mock-up pages for the proposed first issue, and we're like, the story's only so-so, and the art just doesn't deliver.
Yeah.
So we passed on both of those, obviously. But the CCG people sounded great. They did a beautiful game. The game was actually very popular. I want to say when it was released, it was in the top 5, and I believe it reached number 3. And this is back in a day where, there was a new hit CCG coming out every other week.
Yeah.
And, Rifts was doing really well. And the sad story there was just the owner, Paul Brown, he saw that the future was going to be miniatures. And he saw how well Mage Knights was doing. And he decided to do a science fiction version of that. And he put all his money into that. And he just ran into some issues with his China manufacturer, where, their initial quotes were, outlandishly higher than original. And there was one problem after another. And he pumped like everything he had into it, and still didn't have enough money to bring it to market. And that killed his company. And it's a shame, because they were already into their second expansion set. The art was better than the first set. And it was gorgeous. And it never saw print. Sadly, there's a lot of times, when you're dealing with a third party, you never know. you can have approvals and all that kind of stuff, but there are so many things that are beyond your control, and you just have to hope for the best.
Going back to comics, there was one, and it was really good.
Yes, it was. Yes,
Machinations of Doom was amazing. Just Ramon Perez art, a fantastic story. It tied perfectly into my personal favorite setting. And oh man, how did that come to be?
Well, that happened because Ramon was dying to break into comic books. And, it's never as easy as you think. You look at these guys who you love, just like a lot of people look at look at Rifts and they're like, it should be a movie, it should be a comic, it should be a video game, it should be all these things. And I'm like, yes, but we need a third party to do it. And you need someone who believes in it, who can see it, who sees the potential and can get the money people behind it and create something wonderful. And in this particular case, Ramon was dying to break into the comic book industry. And I think he had started to do some things here and there. I think he had done Thundercats and something else. And he came to me and said, Kev, I would love to do a serialized comic strip. I have this idea for a graphic novel. And could we serialize it in the Rifter? Because that's where they first appeared in 8 to 12 page increments. And I'm like, well, gee, Ramon, I can't afford to pay you comic book rates. And he's like, can you afford X? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'll do it for that. And I'm like, but Ramon, you're writing it, lettering it, inking it, penciling it, the whole 9 yards. That doesn't seem like a fair price. And he's like, Kev, it's just something I really want to do. If you would let me do this, I'd appreciate it. And so I said, sure, absolutely. And then once that story was complete, he said, can we do this as a graphic novel, collect it all up? And I said, yes, if we make it a graphic novel / source book.
Mm-hmm.
And he agreed, and he did all the layout and, again, did a bunch of the writing for the character descriptions and stuff. I went in and tweaked things and added actual stats. And, it's a beauty. And Ramon went on to do all kinds of stuff. He's illustrated Spider-Man, and he's working on The Flash right now, and he's done all kinds of stuff for numerous companies. And in fact, he did, I can never remember the name of it, some big graphic novel that actually won him the coveted Will Eisner Award.
Nice.
Books, people know what that is, but yeah, that's something. And yeah, Ramon, he's a freaking great story. Look at his art. I mean, just look at any of the illustrations he's done for Rifts, and almost every single one tells a story, especially if it's a half page or a full page. It just oozes with atmosphere and stuff. One of the guys who worked for me briefly as a freelancer and as a employee, Jason Marker. There's an illustration in Rifts Australia where it's just a girl, like a young girl, kind of leaning back on like a corral fence post, and her backpack's at her feet, and it's kind of this happy. She's got a happy smile on her face, and it's Jason Marker, who also has a fear of spiders. He's like, but look, there's a spider dropping into her backpack. Yeah, exactly, and it's like Australia has the most poisonous spiders and stuff in the world. But those are the cool little details and little story elements that Ramon would squeeze into his work. He's just a natural storyteller and a great human being. I love that guy. He's just a sweetheart. Sean actually got to meet him recently.
Oh, nice.
Past fall, he was at or spring, I guess. He was at the Novi Comic Con. He was one of the guests, and he called up and said, "Hey, you want to do dinner one evening?" And we're like, "Absolutely." I hadn't seen him in a few years, and we stayed in touch, which is nice. And so we had dinner, and Sean was thrilled to meet him, and he's like, "Oh, he's such a nice guy." And I'm like, "Yeah, he is."
There's something that Ramon is very particularly good at, but it's also something that I see a lot of in Palladium Books in general. And it's something that Matthew has commented on which is the fact that a lot of the Palladium art, and again, something Ramon specializes at, is slice of life.
Mm-hmm.
It is not angry people in action poses firing guns into the distance, or 3 angry looking heroes back to back holding weapons against the darkness. There's personality, there's life happening, like, and it showcases much more of the world than a combat scene. Like Rift's New West, the saloon bum. Just that picture, that guy just nope, just one more, just holding his hand up, like there's something going on there, and it's not combat. It's wonderful.
No, it's so. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is that's what I want. I approach, because of my comic book background, I always approached our games as a union of words and pictures. So if you look at a lot of role-playing games, especially early role-playing games, because people have kind of picked up on what we do, and so now the whole game is more of a storytelling experience. But especially back in the 80s and 90s, you would have a cool piece of art. You'd go, wow, what is this? It's just a cool piece of art.
Yeah.
It didn't represent anything in the book, or maybe very broadly, oh, we're talking about angels and demons, so here's a cool picture of an angel and here's a cool picture of a demon. But we're not going to give you the stats for it. We're not going to tell you anything about it. And I, again, for my comic book roots, the synthesis of story and art, it's very crucial. And you want to use the art to help make that world come to life and be clear and recognizable. So I always encourage my artists to show slice of life and character in the characters. And then the other thing is I try to give them, whenever possible, as much freedom, creative freedom as possible. And when you can do that, you can get fabulous work out of fabulous artists.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. You should tap Ramon for some more comic books.
Yes, yes.
I want to know what happens next with those characters.
Yeah.
Like, I know right now the Fallout series of video games is experiencing yet another influx of fans because Amazon made a TV show based on it, and it's one of those that suddenly like, wait a second, Rifts, well, this comic book series in particular, but Rifts in general could make a good TV show.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah.
I agree. It'd be great, but you got to find that individual or group of individuals who have the clout to get it made.
Yeah.
Obviously, because Rifts was optioned at one point by the Walt Disney Company for Jerry Bruckheimer films, they wanted to do a live action movie, and we, after 4 years of negotiating, we finally came up with an agreement in 2001, and we were so excited, and it sounded like, oh, this is going to be made any minute. We're so naive, like everyone has their misconceptions about Hollywood.
Yeah.
And they are misconceptions.
Oh yeah.
So like the first misconception is they look at something like Rifts, they see how wonderful it is, and they're going to make a wonderful movie based on it, and because they look at it and go, oh, and I got to meet Jerry Bruckheimer ever so briefly, and he says, I want to make Rifts my Star Wars. And I'm like, yes, please,
Whoa.
please make it Star Wars.
Whoa. Wild.
But that's not an easy process.
No.
And when someone says that, I think everyone assumes, wow, Kev, how many millions did Hollywood throw at you? If only.
If only. Yeah.
The negotiations started off as lowball as you can imagine. We I got to be careful what I say because of NDAs.
Yeah, that's
but
understood.
I think it's safe to say that around that same time, a standard movie option, and in fact, my buddies at DreamPod 9 had optioned Heavy Gear.
Right.
And there was a really popular independent comic book company at the time that had optioned it had like 11 different titles, and I had optioned every single one, and made like a big deal out of it. And again, I think people thought, oh man, these guys must be floating in money. No, a typical movie option at that time, which was for like a 3-year deal, was $15,000.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah.
And, it's not a lot of money.
No,
No.
no.
So, our deal was better than 15,000, but it took several years to get done. And in fact, Chad Oman was so at Bruckheimer Films, there's Jerry Bruckheimer, of course, and then he has 2 studio heads that handle a lot of the operations, Mike Stenson and Chad Oman. And my contact there was Chad, who I liked a lot. Chad's a very personable guy. I guess you have to be if you're one of the studio heads, right? And Chad was great, and he kind of screwed me when I was meeting Jerry Bruckheimer, because I had been in because of Rift's Promise of Power, and that's a whole nother thing. I was in California at E3, and Chad said, when you're in town, why don't you come on in? And Bruckheimer had been on tour promoting his King Arthur movie. But he was going to be in that day when I came in to meet with Chad and David Franzoni, the author, Academy Award-winning author of Gladiator, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. So I'm all kind of prepped to be professional and good. And in fact, I'm in their little waiting room, and this beatnik-looking kind of guy walks up and sits down next to me and says, "You wouldn't be Kevin by any chance?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And he says, I'm David Franzoni. And I'm like, "Oh, David Franzoni, I love your work." And we start talking about history and all this stuff. And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is great." He goes, "It's really nice meeting someone who appreciates and knows history." And he tells me a bunch of gladiator stories that I cannot share publicly, but they were awesome and really cool. And so David and I go and meet with Chad, and we talk about Rifts, because he's going to be the screenwriter on Rifts. And I'm like, holy shit, this is fantastic. Sorry, I'm swearing.
But we swear. Yeah.
I don't know what your fucking problem is, man.
All right, good. 'Cause I tend to be a swearer. I always try to be better when I'm speaking publicly, but yeah, I got a potty mouth. But so we go in and we discuss Rifts and what would make good stuff in Rifts and some story ideas and all this stuff. And I'm flying high, and Chad had mentioned to me on the phone that Jerry was supposed to come back that day, but they weren't sure when he'd come in. But if he came in while I was there, they would introduce me. And I'm like, that'd be swell. And so everything gets done, and no Jerry Bruckheimer. So I actually have left the building. I mean, I'm no longer in the building. I'm waiting for the taxi that they had called for me. And I'm on the phone with my sweetheart, Kathy Simmons. And I'm telling her, "Oh man, it went great. It's wonderful. I'm so excited. This is going to be amazing." And like one of the assistants is like calling my name and waving me to come back in. And I'm like, "I gotta let you go, Kathy. They're waving me back in. Chad must have a question." And so I come in, and I'm like, and so I'm no longer in be prepared for anything mode. And Chad meets me at the door, and we're walking down this one hall. We go down a very short hall, and there's all these giant movie posters and stuff that they've done, Top Gun and Days of Thunder and all kinds of cool shit. And we make a short turn and step into this office, and I'm standing, and just before we do this, he says, "Oh yeah, Kev, Jerry just got in, and he wants to meet the man who made him wait 4.5 years to cut a license or an option." I'm like, "What? 4.5 years? No, Jerry Bruckheimer." And the next thing you know, I'm standing in front of the man. King Arthur's armor is behind his right shoulder. behind his left on this little table is like a couple of Emmys, I assume, for like Amazing Race, maybe for CSI Vegas, I don't know, a couple of Oscars, and Jerry Bruckheimer, the man himself. And I'm like, oh, in my mind, racing with the whole 4.5 year line. And Jerry's like, very nice. And he goes, Kevin, it's so nice to meet you. And that's when he tells me I want to make Rifts my Star Wars. And I'm like, yeah, that'd be great. And he's like, so what gave you, and we shake hands, and he's like, do you mind if I eat my lunch? I just got in and I'm hungry. And I'm like, no, of course, eat lunch, please, which was like a salad, a chicken salad of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so Kevin, what gave you the idea for Rifts? What got you into this? And I just start to blither like a monkey. And I'm starting with like, well, in 1981, and I'm like, in my mind, it's like I'm actually thinking, what the fuck are you saying? Shut up. He doesn't want to hear your life history.
Yeah.
Talk about Rifts.
Yeah.
But I'm just like blithering on. And at some point, Chad just kind of takes me by the shoulders and turns me and walks me out of the room. And Bruckheimer's like, it was very nice meeting you. And I'm like, what have I done?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh.
And I just felt so embarrassed. And Kathy pointed out to me that she's sure that I'm usually not starstruck.
Right.
I've met a lot of famous people, and it's like, it's always nice, but I know they're normal people like anyone else, or hopefully. I mean, some people, of course, are whack jobs and or egomaniacs and things, but my experience has been most people, even famous people, are usually very, very nice. And very shockingly normal. Like there's a lot of people who are just nice folks. Like I got to meet Joe Manganiello, who's a huge fan of both Turtles and Rifts. He was running a super long Rifts campaign for buddies back. I guess they were playing online. And up until like, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, he was running, I think, once a month. One of his big favorite characters is a juicer assassin. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And in fact, when I first spoke to Manganiello, I spoke to his brother, Nick, first. And we have a nice conversation. And Nick's, at the end of the conversation, Nick's like, Joe's going to be so jealous that I got to talk to you first. So, and anyways, Kathy was pointed out that she's sure that, Jerry's used to, people being starstruck, and he probably didn't think anything of it. But I'm like, I was an idiot, just a blithering idiot.
Yeah.
It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I was so cool and calm, though, meeting Chad in person.
Yeah.
And meeting David Franzoni, who was totally unexpected. I was just like the consummate pro. Cool, calm, collected, and then
just shove you through a door without warning. Boom.
Yeah. Oh, it hits me with that zinger line, and then there's Jerry, as if he's like teleported in front of me. It's just like, whoa. Yeah. I owe Chad for that one.
It happens. I mean, as much as we always want to remember, whenever you meet someone, they put their underwear on the same way as everybody else. You have those moments, right?
Yeah.
So, and it was cool that, they had some big name people. They were talking about directors, and they were throwing names out like, Ridley Scott and Michael Bay and folks like that. And neither one picked up on it. And then the big problem with that is they sat on Rifts for like 18 years. They couldn't get a good script.
Yeah.
Well, the problem was they needed an epic script, something that they knew would be what he said. What Chad had mentioned to me is they need a script that's like an A+. And just that, and I think Jerry inadvertently sabotaged himself, because I got to see a lot of the plot summaries for about a dozen of the films or screenplays. And I think he told everyone, I see this as my Star Wars. So the problem with that was, when Jerry said that, he meant something epic and, the scale and magnitude of Star Wars, not give me Star Wars.
Right.
I'm reading these little story summaries and I'm like, oh, there's the cantina scene.
Yep.
Oh, there's Tatooine.
Yeah.
Oh, there's, and it was like, oh, geez, they're giving them, riff Star Wars. And it's like, that's not what Jerry meant, guys.
Yeah.
And at one point, they wanted me to take a run at the script, which I was really excited about. And they were paying me the high end of like a first time writer. But there are some things in there that we felt like I couldn't have signed that agreement. My attorney and agent said, don't do this. So I lost that opportunity, which was too bad. And we probably could have negotiated something, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I just decided to walk away from that. And there were a couple good scripts. I understand that Ross and Marshall Thurber's screenplay was very good, but not quite at where they wanted it to be. And they also felt, at least at that time, that the magnitude of the story, especially the big final battle, would be too expensive to make. So they turned that down. And then I didn't actually see most of the scripts. I saw a lot of summaries and things, and then we would talk about elements of it. But it is what it is, right? And they kept renewing our option. So they're very serious. I mean, I know they threw millions of dollars at it, but it just didn't happen. And people don't understand that. Ross and Marshall Thurber said, I once asked him, so how does anything get made in Hollywood? And he says, a lot of luck and organized chaos.
My cousin actually worked in the movie industry for a while, and she once described every single film out of a major studio is building Barnum and Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus from the ground up every single time. Every time you go to do a movie, you are creating that entire concept from the ground up with the logistics and all of that. And it's a massive undertaking. And the fact that they hung on to it and were actually working for it that long, I mean,
18 years.
Yeah, that's a compliment, because a lot of things just get optioned and put on a shelf. And the fact that they were throwing screenwriter after screenwriter after it, somebody believed in it pretty hard.
Well, and it's funny how things, I think it's safe me telling this story. Because I asked Jad, how was it that Bruckheimer Films even heard of Rifts? And apparently Bruckheimer's daughter was dating a young man who had aspirations for becoming a screenwriter. And he was a big Rifts player. And so apparently at Thanksgiving dinner, like year 2000 Thanksgiving, this guy comes up to Jerry and goes, Jerry, I want to show you this book. It's called Rifts. I think it'd make a great movie. And Bruckheimer flipped through it and went, wow, this is great. Why don't you take a run at it? And when this kid's manuscript, I should say young man, I understand he was in his 20s. When that script didn't pan out, Jerry still went after it and, secured the rights and had a lot of guys take a shot at it. They just couldn't nail it down. And so that's a great example of, you just had some role player who happened to have a connection to somebody who he's able to convince, hey, this would be a great movie. Manganiello always thought that it would be better as a series, whether it was streaming or TV. And I loved his description of Rifts. His pitch was Star Wars and Lord of the Rings combined, only bigger.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that definitely feels like it, because That's kind of the feel you get when you look at like the Coalition Wars series of books that you all did. You know, Star Wars meets Lord of the Rings is what you got in so many ways.
Yeah, if the Galactic Empire invaded the Shire.
Yeah, down to down to something that literally feels like the last ride of the Rohirrim. You know?
Yeah. So, okay, I've heard a lot of people talk about how a lot of the changes that came in some of the character aspects of the Rifts Ultimate Edition were due to IP separation, trying to like keep certain things separate. Like the dragons are different, the introduction of the fusionist. How much of that is true?
Mainly with Rift's Ultimate Edition, I just wanted to have a new edition with some clarifications and additional material. Carmen Belair was actually the guy who came up to me with that suggestion and helped contribute to the book, especially with like the Techno Wizard and some of the dragon stuff. But yeah, some of it we did at the same time try to separate away. Like when we did the movie deal, there were exclusions. For example, Mechanoids was not part of the deal because it's a separate IP. The conversion books were not part of the deal. The novels weren't part of the deal because they were kind of separate intellectual properties. And so, yeah, you want to, make sure your IPs are as separate and distinct as possible. Just like recently with the reprint of Rifts Africa, we took out the clear fact that Victor Laszlo is Victor Laszlo. We now call him the Victor, as in being victorious, and that it is, believed that he was, from this earlier time in Earth history, and we allude to the fact that he's Victor Laszlo, but we don't call him Victor Laszlo, because beyond the supernatural needs to be a separate entity. The Splugorth we're kind of removing from Phase World and the Three Galaxies, because that's part of the Rift's Earth. They have such a huge presence that the Splugorth need to be clearly defined as, an entity on Rift's Earth. So, yeah, you have to, that's one of the business things you have to keep in mind. Comic books had issues with that for a while. Like for a while, I think it was Spider-Man was the rights to do a Spider-Man movie was owned by like 2 or 3 film studios, if I recall correctly. And they had to iron all that out. And I remember in the 70s or 80s, the Fantastic Four was optioned for some kind of movie, or one of the characters was optioned for a movie. So you had the Fantastic Four, but it wasn't, I forget which character wasn't there. I want to say it was maybe Ben Grimm, the Thing. So you had like Invisible Girl, Reed Richards, Johnny Storm, and some funky little robot.
Yeah.
And it was because this studio had the rights to that character. And, Hollywood doesn't play nice, even with each other. So
No.
it just, you couldn't use that character. So the Fantastic Four cartoon was not quite the Fantastic Four. And so we're trying to avoid that kind of thing, because we've had all kinds of nibbles from Hollywood. I mean, I had Christopher Columbus's studio call me up, and a bunch of Brad Payton, who did Rampage, and a bunch of other folks have reached out to us about not just Rifts, but Ninjas and Super Spies and Nightbane, Beyond the Supernatural. The problem is, who is it? What kind of clout do they have? What are they willing to work up with you? And a lot of the contracts, the studios like things, they like to control everything and own everything. So you have to be very careful with the language. And it's like, let's just work up a quick, clean, dirty, kind of quick, dirty little option agreement. And it's like, no, you can't do a quick, dirty option agreement because I'm potentially giving away rights.
Right.
Like one deal was they wanted to basically pay us commonly acceptable rates for a company of our caliber. And I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Oh, that. I'm glad you walked away from that one.
No kidding.
I'm aware of at least a couple other companies in the RPG industry who bit on literally that language, and suddenly you have lawyers debating what qualifies as your size in the industry, especially when you have, especially at the time when you had Wizards of the Coast, not yet acquired by Hasbro, running around with Dungeons and Dragons as a license. And so, you have this like stratospheric size operation here. And then of course there's all these mom and pops working out of garages. Where do you put something like Atlas Games or Palladium Books or, that argument?
And why would they deserve less?
Right.
For a good IP.
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's Hollywood is crazy and wild, and not that I wouldn't love to see a movie or a miniseries or a streaming series for any of our IPs. Same thing goes with video games. We've had some close encounters with those as well.
Yeah. And, let's talk about that, because I know there's been a lot of close encounters in the video game realms with Rifts. So, how did that even become a thing?
Well, video games are Hollywood, and video games are always looking for established IPs. So big companies, especially Hollywood, they're always risk adverse, which is why you see movies made on, a Milton Bradley game, or I guess it's Hasbro. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like Battleship. And the logic behind Battleship, by the way, it on a certain level, it kind of makes sense. They sat back and said, this is one of the best-selling games of all time. And we're talking humongous numbers. For example, I had an insider tell me that Scrabble, which has been around for a gazillion years, sells 5 million units a quarter. 5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing like Monopoly. It's humongous. So when you have a big game that you sit back and go, wow, generations have played Battleship, and let's assume they only sell 3 million units of Battleship every quarter. And it could be more. It could be gigantic. We don't know what those numbers are. So the fact that so many people know the brand, it could make a good movie, right? Obviously not, but...
supposedly Candyland hasn't gone out of being under option to somebody since the 70s.
Yeah.
So that does not surprise me at all.
Same thing with Monopoly. So they're always looking for games that have a built-in audience to mitigate their risk. And so, Rifts being Palladium's biggest game and being one of the games that, most people have heard of, at least heard of if they haven't played it, it's very attractive to Hollywood and video games. So yeah, at one point we had BioWare reach out to us and say, yeah, you're one of the 3 games we're looking at. For developing is our next big project, and they ended up going with something you guys might have heard of. I think it's called Star Wars.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Knights of the Old Republic could have been Rifts.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And then THQ, they were like optioning everything at one point.
Yep.
Before they went under.
Yep.
And they had done some kind of Warhammer 40K thing that was doing decent. So when they reached out to us, we went, yeah, the THQ, let's do this. But that deal never happened. And then like a year later, the company went out of business or sold to someone else. And And then there was in 2008, we actually probably 2007, we were approached by a young startup company. It was pretty much just this one guy, and I think in his programmer who really knew their shit and was willing to pony up some big bucks to license Rifts. And he actually had 2 or 3 millionaires, angel investors, who were interested in backing a Rifts massively multiplayer online game. And that was super exciting. And I really liked the guy who had approached us. Mark Friedman cut a deal. The guy actually mortgaged his house to get this project going, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so here's a guy who's super dedicated. He knew Rifts inside and out. He had great ideas. He says, I want you to start putting together your team. So I'm going to reach out to Carl Galiba and Eric Wojcik and well, actually Eric hadn't passed yet, but he was already sick. But he endorsed it. I mean, he checked this guy out and stuff and was like, yeah, Kev, this is probably the guy. And I'm like, okay, great. And like I said, in 2007, Eric was still around.
Mm-hmm.
And so 2008, I think early 2008, we signed a contract. And then the global economic crisis hits. And the housing crisis hits and everything hits. And his 2 or 3 millionaire angel investors disappear.
Yep.
And he had a couple other guys lined up, and it was one of these weird situations where it's like, I'll tell you what, if you can get someone to pony up whatever it is, $1 million, 10 million, I'll match it. And this poor guy is scrambling to get anybody to cough up, $1 million or more, and he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so the sad thing with that is Eric had been also talking to somebody, and this group reached out to us, and they were the real deal, and they were more established, and they wanted to release Rifts in like a 3-tier plan. They also ultimately wanted to do an MMOG because, World of Warcraft was gigantic. And there were a few others out there at the time, EVE Online and a few other MMOs that were huge. And so that was what everyone was looking at. And these guys were like, well, we want to start slow. We want to first do it as a real-time strategy game.
Oh.
And we want to come out with a first-person shooter. And then we want to do the MMOG. And I was like, that would be great. I wish you had reached out, a month or 2 earlier, because we already signed a deal.
Mm-hmm.
This other guy to do an MMOG. But, things are looking kind of rough on his end. And I don't know if this is going to happen. Why don't we make an agreement for these first 2 things? And we can even have a clause in there that says, if this other guy can't pull off the MMOG, get it off the ground, you guys get those rights as well for whatever they were ponying up in the first place. And they're like, no, we can't do that. We have to know that we can do all 3. And if we can't, and we can't wait, because I was like, if you just wait like 6 or 8 months, we'll know for sure. And they're like, sorry, we can't wait 6 or 8 months. We have to jump into our next project. So that disappeared. And then there was a point where Keith Parkinson was involved with a company whose name escapes me right now. That my understanding, he was a partner in, and as he explained it, the people he was working with, the people he was partnering with, were some of the top designers at among the EverQuest people.
Sony Online Entertainment.
Yeah.
And they were in the middle of Keith and these other 2-3 guys were in the middle of finishing some game that they were working on already. It was going to have all art by Keith Parkinson and all this stuff. And Keith's like, Kev, I want our next project to be Rifts. And I'm like, holy cow, yes, please. That would be fantastic. And so they're working up contracts, and Keith's all excited about it. This is like 2005 2004, I want to say. And Keith was already sick. He had leukemia, and they were looking for bone marrow donors.
Mm.
And they could not find a damn match for Keith. And finally, they found a match, and he gets his bone marrow replaced. And he calls me up and he's like, Kev, I feel like I'm 28 again. This is fantastic. I've never felt better. And like a month or two later, he's gone. The bone marrow his body rejected the bone marrow transplant.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Keith dies, which was just crushing all by itself, because he and I were very tight.
Yeah.
We had kind of gone our separate ways for a number of years, but a year or two earlier, we got back together, and we were just tight again and so excited. And with Keith gone, the studio's like, I don't know if we can move forward with this project. And then their game came out, and it did not do very well, their first MMO. And again, they're reeling from the loss of one of their key creative people, Keith Parkinson, who I'm sure was a friend of theirs at this point as well. And it's hard to deal with that kind of loss. And they reached out to me and said, sorry, Kev, we're going to have to back out. I mean, we were waiting to get the contract. Again, I had put together my team. I put together a creative team, and we were ready to rock and roll. And this is why, when Sean Owen Robertson came on board as my creative director and business partner. And he said, look, we got to stop announcing freaking projects. These are all great examples of, and these we had not announced, but these are all examples of things where this is why we can't talk about a lot of things, because sadly, 9 out of 10 times this exciting deal falls through. I mean, why would you think Disney and Jerry Bruckheimer would fall through? I mean, they're two of the biggest companies. Jerry Bruckheimer was hot as hell back then.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about coming off of the Pirates of the Caribbean and some other hits, National Treasure. He had a couple hit TV shows. He was the hottest thing since, popcorn. And Disney was the biggest distributor in Hollywood. It sounds like a match made in heaven. And the reason Disney got involved was because Jerry Bruckheimer had a first look deal with Disney. So any project he wanted to do, he had to bounce by Disney first. And if they said, we're not interested, he could shop it around. But Disney said, oh, yeah, it looks great. Rifts is cool. Let's get it.
Nice. Disney.
I did have a question about the whole Bruckheimer phase.
Uh-huh.
So I know one of the great things is you and Palladium, while you have handled licensed properties in the past, they have to be properties that really, really call to you. Turtles, Robotech, etc., etc. Did you ever consider seeing if you could build in your agreements with Bruckheimer access to some of the IP they had licensing for?
That's not how Hollywood works. I'm sorry, Jacob.
It does sometimes. It occasionally it does, because you can sometimes use it as a way to get your foot in the door and go, since we're talking about this, how about we talk about this reciprocal on the other side, where you license this from us, we license this from you. And it's not so much that it's part of the same contract, but since you're having the conversation anyways, you can sometimes branch off and get side deals floated.
Yeah, sometimes. That wasn't going to happen with this one.
Okay. Because literally, the only reason it came up to me was because National Treasure actually started as one of those things where there was this other project that was being discussed, and pitched to Bruckheimer, and Bruckheimer said, yes, but since we're having this conversation, can we talk about this thing over here that I know you're working on? So I was just wondering if you had thought about floating something like that.
I think if we had, I think those kind of deals happen more with Hollywood insiders, and
usually, yeah.
And we had they made the Rift movie, had it been a blockbuster, then yeah, I think that would have given us a lot more credibility and clout, and we could have said, hey, how about on this next project? Because that was the exciting thing too, is we figured all we need is one hit, because Hollywood, they play follow the leader.
Right.
So if Bruckheimer and Disney came out with a hit Rifts movie, everyone in Hollywood would be knocking down our door for, Heroes Unlimited and Ninjas and Super Spies and everything under the sun. That would have been great. And we were excited about those possibilities. Plus, ancillary rights.
Yeah.
My agent, Mark Friedman, said that he was excited because he said, Kev, even if they make just a good movie.
Yeah.
A good movie, and especially if there's talk about a possible sequel, he said Rifts is a toy maker's wet dream.
I was going to say, points on the merchandising alone would be worthwhile.
Oh, wow. Oh, just if we could get our hands on Veritech-sized articulated Glitterbois. Just
that would be sweet.
Yeah.
But it's the luck of the draw. And I don't believe in jinxes, but I think I don't know what's the odds. So
right.
So one of the interesting things is when we were negotiating the movie deal, and when we were negotiating the Nokia Rift's Promise of Power game for the N-Gage, in both cases, the person we were talking to started to say, well, you realize we're going to make you, and Friedman in both cases was like, no, don't finish that line, don't say it. And they're like, millions of dollars. And Mark just like, his head hung low. And he's like, it's a jinx.
Mm-hmm.
Every deal I've ever cut, someone says, we're going to make you millions on this deal. It never happens. And like I said, I don't believe in jinxes. I'm not very superstitious, but the Disney deal, the Rifts movie made us nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't. Made money because of the movie option, but the movie never happened. And so there were no millions of dollars. And the same thing with the N-Gage. They make this beautiful product. It's got like 60 hours of playability for a freaking mobile game.
Mm-hmm.
If you played out every possible story option, it's like 60 hours or 62 hours. To play the main theme, the main game, it's 30 hours. It's very impressive. They did a beautiful job on it. Nokia spent a ton of money on it. It was one of their more expensive projects to develop. It was really well done. The story was great. And they announced the release of Rift's Promise of Power. And I don't remember, it was actually a week or 2 weeks later, but it felt like it was just a day or two later that Nokia then announces the N-Gage will no longer be supported. And yeah, guess where that went.
Yep.
They did not make us millions of dollars. And, we've been close. We've been, hell, you don't get bigger than frickin' Disney.
Right.
And at the time, Nokia was the 6th largest company in the world. So, we've had some close encounters with Hollywood and video games and potentially huge moneymakers. And it just apparently wasn't meant to be because they just didn't happen. Maybe in the future.
Yeah.
You always got to be positive. And that's why right now, Sean and I are just focused on doing games that we know we can do. And if stuff comes our way, of course, we'll consider it. We'll look into it. We'll explore the possibilities. We'd love to option a movie or TV show. We'd love to cut a license for video games. But even there, it's one of those situations where the environment has also changed a ton.
Yeah.
I don't know if something like that would ever happen because these big companies, including video game companies, want to own everything. Like we were, I can't disclose who, but this was a huge company worth billions of dollars, and they wanted to acquire Rifts, but they wanted to buy Palladium, and they had plans on doing Rifts video games, movies, TV show, the whole 9 yards. And we're like, I don't think so. And
Right.
they're like, what? How can you turn that down? And, we'll let you, we'll pump money into your company, and you can run it just like you always do. And we're like, look,
So they always say.
That's what they always say.
Yeah.
exactly. And the guy who had reached out to us was an impressive individual, and we liked him very much, and we thought we could really work with him very well. But I said to him, look, it's a gigantic corporation. For them, the bottom line is money. And as much as we like you and we think we could do great things together, you could be gone in a year or 2 or 3. And then what? We're dealing with some guy we hate in a company whose bottom line is the dollar. Are they going to let us do, Christmas surprise packages, for example?
Right.
And I threw that example out to him, and he goes, no, they would not allow that.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that blows.
Yeah.
And for me, yes, I would love to have tons of money. So anyone out there who's attached to Hollywood or the video game industry, please license my stuff. I want to make lots of money. I want you to make lots of money with my IPs. I'm happy to work with you. But for me and Sean both, the bottom line isn't making gazillions of dollars. It's having a job that we love to go to, a job that we love creating new material for, a job that we love our customer base. Those are the important things, a job where we love the people we work with. Those are more important than, hey, here's a pile of money.
Yeah.
And everyone says, oh, you could just go out and start your own new company. It's like, that is so difficult.
Yeah.
People have no idea how difficult that is. It was great that I was able to pull it off once. And could I pull it off again? I'd like to think yes. But you never know. I mean, look at Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, Barbie. If these are all mega brands that are known worldwide, if it was easy to do, the people who created all these things would have 29 different hits just as big as those.
Right.
But they don't, because you never know what's going to resonate with the public. You never know how you can catch magic in a bottle, lightning in a bottle. I actually saw an interview with the guys who created Power Rangers, and the interviewer, typical media guy, is like, so what's your next mega hit? They're like, dude, we don't know if we'll ever create another mega hit. We're amazed that Power Rangers is as big as it is. We're thrilled out of our mind. But, you never know what's going to hit. So you just don't know. I mean, yeah, I'd like to think, like I said, I like to think of myself as Steven Spielberg, and I can just go out and make my next hit movie, or in my case, my next hit game. But can I? Would I? I don't know. So we have something wonderful that we love. We're going to stick with it.
Yeah.
And hopefully someday Hollywood comes to us. But the problem is, because they want to own everything, because we kept telling this guy, look, we don't want to sell our company. We don't want to sell all our IPs. License, we'll give you a great deal on a license. And they're like, well, we want to do stuff for a long time. We're like, we'll give you an insanely long time for the license with like automatic renewals, as long as you're producing whatever that's making us some money. And he goes, no, we want to have complete control.
Right. Yep.
And that's the new paradigm in Hollywood, is they want to own everything. They want to have all the rights. They want to have the comic book rights and the gaming rights and the board game rights and the miniature rights and the toy rights and the music rights and the comic book rights and, obviously movies and television. And I get it. If I had bazillions of dollars and could own everything, I might go for that too. But I don't know how many flat out licenses these days happen because the companies with big bucks just want to buy you so they can control absolutely everything. And that's okay. We're going to focus on our games, and who knows, maybe someday we'll do our own comic books, or we'll do more novels or board games or miniature games. I don't know. Right now we're focused on building the company, making it stronger than ever, getting out products that people have been waiting for a long time, and we'll see where it goes.
So good on you for not selling that product, for not selling that IP, because a fantastic example of how that goes wrong with beloved, cherished by millions IPs.
Know where this is going.
Conan the Barbarian. Conan, one of the greatest tales Robert E. Howard told, a world-renowned character. Generations love this character and the stories. Conan, the entire property, ended up getting purchased by a company in Norway, I believe, Funcom. And then they've kind of run it into the ground. They've done very little with it. And the stuff that they've done with it starts out good, but then they abandon it, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But now Funcom is owned by Chinese company Tencent.
Mm-hmm.
Which means Conan is owned by Chinese mobile game loot box gachapon Tencent.
Mm-hmm.
That could have happened with Rifts.
Well, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And in fact, it was funny because Sean had just been with us. Had just joined me. I mean, like, this offer comes like 3 months. He's been with me for like 3 or 4 months. And the funny part of that is, I'm thinking, oh shit, what if they're offering us millions of dollars and Sean wants to sell the company? And Sean's thinking, oh shit, Kevin's in his 60s. Maybe he's looking to retire. What if they offer us millions and he wants to sell the company? and neither one of us wanted to do it, thank goodness. And when we realized that, it was pretty funny. We had a good laugh over that. I can say, in regard to Conan, that Titan Comics, or Titan Publishing, is producing some magnificent Conan comics right now. And they re-released the Savage Sword of Conan.
Oh.
So maybe it as a black and white magazine, comic magazine. So if you're a Conan fan, check those out, because the color comic has been fantastic. Just fantastic. Just as good or better than anything Marvel's ever done or any other publisher's ever done in comic books.
That's good to know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But yeah, who knows what the fate will be. And the problem with giganto corporations is, for the most part, unless there's someone creative, it seems weird. It seems like either you have to be creative and under the radar, or creative and have a lot of clout where the higher ups trust you to cut you loose and let you do something that's epic. Who knows? I mean, is Conan destined to fall to the wayside? Hard to say. But even big companies, I mean, Star Wars hasn't exactly been, great under the Disney helm. There's a few beauties out there, but
yeah.
Again, talk about someone in their 60s who was trying to retire. That's kind of how Disney got Star Wars, so that makes sense.
Well, if he gave him an offer he couldn't refuse.
Never argue with a mouse with a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, moving back to things that have come out, RPG adjacent stuff. We've got the novels, of which I believe there are 4 now. There's the trilogy by Adam, and then there was Duty's Edge, which I don't think came out that long ago.
Oh, like 2 years, I want to say.
Yeah.
And then we collected the Hammer of the Forge as 2 novels. It was a long running serial in the Rifter. Yeah, and again, those are situations where someone came to us and said, "I'd love to write a novel," and we looked at his stuff and said, it seems like you got the chops. Why don't you go ahead and write it on spec? And he did a good job, and we released it as the trilogy. And then same thing with Duty's Edge. Will Irwin, who also does some of our maps.
They are amazing maps.
Mhm.
He's really good at what he does.
Yes,
Yeah.
he is.
He reached out to me and said, "Hey, I published this thing," and I think he had serialized it on his own website or something, and said, "Man, I'd love to see Palladium publish it." And the thing is, for us, we're a game company. We do
Yeah.
role playing, so we're not Bantam Books or Random House, or so we're not going to get you on the bestsellers list. And
Right.
I think a lot of these guys, they're thinking, "Oh wow, I could sell 10 or 20 or 50,000 copies," and it's like, maybe you can sell 500 or 1,000 or
Yeah.
5,000 copies. Not, and I tell them that, and if they say I still want to do it and it's good material, then we'll consider publishing it. And that's how those came about. And the original trilogy, a lot of people just loved those books. So yeah, Adam Chilson did a good job. He was only in his 20s
Yeah.
Oh. Ah,
when he wrote those. Yeah.
Jeez.
guy knew his rifts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it basically I like to describe that series as like, I forget his name, but it's like Grognok Dragon's really terrible, horrible, no good, bad day. It just keeps coming back to this dragon just failing at everything. Yep.
We've also dabbled in miniatures, and with again limited success. When we first came out with the metal miniatures in 1999, I think. The technology wasn't that great, and we went with
Mhm.
Ratham, as they approached us about doing them, and hooked us up with some sculptors, and that was a learning curve going through all that and figuring stuff out. And the Ratham manufacturing facility was just here in London, Ontario, in Canada, which is only like 2 hours away. So we drove down and got to see the facility and had those made, and they did all right. Some did better than others. Some of it based on quality, some of it based on the characters. So, for example, a Glitterbois, every version of a Glitterbois we ever make
Is gonna sell.
always sells out, and Ratham was no different. So we sold 5 or 10,000 copies of that initially, but the other ones not so much. And again, some did good, some did better than others. It wasn't anything to write home about. They did okay. I think partly because our games are written more theater of the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miniatures, and in the more recent miniatures, the resin miniatures, which are gorgeous, those came in the aftermath of Carmen Belaire's failed Kickstarter to create a Rifts board game. Carmen just had this great idea, and again, he's one of those guys who pumped in just truckloads of money to make a bunch of beautiful miniatures. I think he overpaid, and he hadn't thought through his whole Kickstarter or his entire game, or was going through some emotional things at the time, and it just the Kickstarter, he had to cancel the Kickstarter, even though it probably would have succeeded. But he went through issues, some medical issues and some other things, and at some point he was like, "Kev, the game's never coming out, but I hate to see those miniatures just never be seen. So if you want to make them and offer them, here's my files." And I'm like, "That's pretty generous." But again, we're not making a ton of money on them.
Right.
And some sold better than others, and they're all freaking beautiful. They're like 28 or 32 millimeter. Heroic 28, I guess, is actually more like 32 millimeter. But the details amazing, and they're beautiful figures. I highly recommend them to anyone who wants just to have a cool piece or three on their desk. The chainsaw Glitterbois is just wild. But they're all great, the Glitterbois and the Juicer and the Leyline Walker is amazing. The Triax Borg is amazing. They're just great pieces.
I can imagine with Savage Rifts being a thing now and Savage Worlds having a much heavier focus on tabletop squares and minis. I can imagine they would be a lot very popular for that group of players at least. But I know, like, whenever I run Rifts or any Palladium game, any of them, I almost never use any kind of tabletop representation because, well, at least with Rifts in particular, you're talking thousands of feet sometimes of range. It's there's so much distance. We just cannot portray something like that in any kind of an accurate square by square representation.
By the time you get your characters and a spider skullwalker on the same map, the spider skullwalker is taking up half the table.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, and also they have their cardboard, what they call pawns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're sort of like cardboard miniatures with a front and a back, and they're gorgeous. And I know they do pretty well with those in their market, in their audience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we're not seeing them picking up the resin minis.
Mm-hmm.
We get little spurts, but not much. In fact, I should mention, if you don't mind, while we're talking, the Savage Rifts Europa books. Their Kickstarter will start on Tuesday at noon. So, and the cool thing about the Savage World stuff is that it is all official stuff. When we approve it, we read everything. I read everything. It gets approved, and it's a good resource for people who are looking for adventure ideas and things, or just even some updated, because they're updating everything to like 109 PA, and it's fun to read about what's happened in between, and in this case with places like Triax and Mindworks and England, and it's going to be good. And then they're going to have stuff on France.
Ooh.
And Italy.
Okay, I know this has probably been asked multiple times, but I've got to go there myself. I was a Savage Worlds heavy Savage Worlds player for a long time, and when Savage Rifts was announced, I just my head exploded. Never figured anything like that would ever happen. So why how did this come into being?
Well, really, you can thank Sean Patrick Fannin as the guy who I think was the real mover and shaker in that. Sean was a huge fan of Savage Worlds and a huge, huge fan of Rifts. And he was a writer for Savage Worlds, writer, game designer. And he had convinced Shane Hensley, the owner of Pinnacle Entertainment Group, to license Rifts. And of course, Sean had talked to me as well. And so Fannin helped kind of put the deal together. And I think, Shane doesn't really, it's ironic because Shane doesn't really know Rifts, doesn't really care about Rifts. I mean, he cares about a good product for his company, but it's not like Shane Hensley, who created Deadland, is a fan of Rifts, has played Rifts. So I'm surprised at the number of people who do play Rifts. I mean, like famous people. And game designers, which is cool. But Shane Hensley's not one of them. So when Fannin came to him and explained how well Rifts is doing and stuff, and how badly Fannin wanted to do it, I think Shane just said, "Sure, why not? Let's give it a try." It's not like the license was $100,000 or more. It was something very reasonable, and we hammered out the details, and the rest is history. And in fact, I can tell you that Shane expected the Rifts Kickstarter to do much less than the initial Kickstarter than it actually did. And so he was pleasantly surprised. And he's like, "Hey, this is really good." And then it's ironic, but Sean Patrick Fannin left the project, and then they bring in Sean Owen Robertson to take over. I was teasing them for a while, going, "What is everyone working at Pinnacle named Shane or Sean?"
It sometimes feels like it.
But they're doing really good work. I'm really happy with it. I think the initial books were, I think I would agree with what fans initially said, which was kind of like Rifts Light. But they moved away from that very quickly. I think Sean Robertson was pretty pivotal in that. And I think the books have a very much more Rifts feel with regard to lore and adventures. So they do great maps and do great adventures. You get those beautiful color pawns for a lot of things. I mean, they've got some good stuff that can be used by Savage World players and Palladium players. So, people should look at it as a potential resource. I mean, take a look at the books and see if it's something you really want. But it's good stuff. I'm loving what they're doing for the most part.
So the Savage Rifts Europa that's coming out, carrying forward the story, then what you said, 109?
I think it's 109. Yep.
Gotcha. How much input do you have over where the story goes? Or not just for you, but how much input does Palladium Books have over that?
As much as we want.
Okay.
So, for example, with the South America books and the Atlantis books and these Europa books, they send in an outline and they have us look at it. And I look at it and approve or disapprove or correct things, because sometimes they've got a great idea, but it's not appropriate, or it's wrong, or they just need to change some of the details to make it work. So yeah, I go through the initial outline and yay or nay it. And that's usually after Sean has gone through the initial, Sean Robertson has gone through the initial outline, or in a couple cases had created the outline.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as everyone knows by now, Sean just loves Rifts and knows it inside and out, knows it every bit as well as I do, maybe better, because he had to research it more recently. There's a bunch of stuff, and you start referencing books that I wrote 20 or 30 years ago. I'm like, let me grab my copy. Take a look.
I believe I wrote that.
Well, I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me all the time, where it's like, I don't remember if that's the final product or an earlier draft. Let me check.
Yeah.
What's embarrassing is when I look at stuff and I'm thinking, man, who wrote this? This is great. And it's like, oh, I wrote that.
So the silver and gold editions, when did that start? Was 1995 the first one you ever did?
Yeah. It was. Let me think about that. I'm pretty sure it was. And we did it for Rifts, and we printed big numbers. I want to say the gold editions were actually smaller and more reasonable. I want to say we did 500 or 1,000 of the gold editions. And then we printed like 5,000 of the silver editions. And oh my gosh, they just blew up. Or of course, this 1995, Rifts was at its pinnacle at Gen Con. Holy cow. I'm glad we had brought as many copies of both books as we did, because we had a bigger booth than we have now. I think it was like an 8-booth island. And we had people like 8-10 people deep all the way around the whole thing, clamoring for those books. It was amazing.
It took me quite a while to hunt down one of the Ultimate editions that was in the foil. I believe it's gold. Yeah. And when I was finally, I was never able to find one of the original Rifts in gold or silver until the 30th anniversary came out. And like I said, when we talked last time, I jumped on that so quick, I almost like hurt my wrist. It was just like, bam, now. And that kicked off a discussion on our Discord where people are like, oh, which one do I have? And trying to track them down. And they're really, really, really difficult to find.
Yeah. Those are prized possessions.
Yep.
Oh yeah, and they're not cheap.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and y'all kept that up. I think the first one that I ever actually acquired was I was recently, actually. My gold foil, silver foil, whatever collection has only started recently. I got one of the foils for the Bestiary 1.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Walton's art.
Oh,
Amazing. She is, just blowing my mind. So I'm assuming Bestiary 2 is going to be more Chuck.
Well, I mean, you talk about the Chuck art in the Rift Bestiary Volume 1, but I think he only did like 15 or 20 pieces. They're just memorable.
They're so
they're
memorable.
so memorable.
Yeah.
Because we did reprint a bunch of the art. We had some other new art done by other people, and you're going to see the same thing in the Bestiary 2. There's some Chuck and some other people, like Stephen Cummings had done some art for both books, and Nick Bradshaw, and I think Mike Luma, along with Chuck. So yeah, it's going to be great.
That got me step by step, brain moving through loops here. Bradshaw, for some reason, remembering other people, and that's taking me back to talking back again. Art. Randy Post has popped so much fantastic work in that. What was it like working with Post? He was so prolific at that time.
He's easy breezy to work with.
Oh man!
I mean, he always hits his deadline. Takes notes really well. Has a keen understanding of what you want. He seems to pick up on what you need and want very quickly. In fact, there was a bunch of post art in Randy Post art in Rifts Japan, and of course the Nightbane RPG.
Yeah.
He's outstanding.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of times you'll see the artist's signature, and it'll be an R and a P, and you're like, oh, is this Post or Perez? And sometimes they're really close, so it's difficult to, because they both do that shades of black, and it's amazing how somebody can do black and then do black in the same picture that's a deeper black than that black, and they're both really good at it. So I'm always surprised when it's a different RP than I thought it was.
Well, Ramon Perez tends to write Perez or Ramon K. Perez, but yeah, sometimes it's just his initials.
Yep. RK Post, RK Perez.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Both RKPs, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Something that you had,
go ahead.
Oh, something that you had mentioned last time that I wrote a note to discuss more, and it was then further in my brain because Carl had joined our Discord, said hello, and talked a little bit. The Minion War. Is that still going on? Has that concluded?
Oh,
no, it's not concluded. It is still going on, and we have some great stuff coming up for that.
Oh man, because it's huge. It has crossed so many of the books, like have tied into it. Have you ever done anything in the history of the Megaverse that has been that tied together?
No. Nope. And that's all Carl's idea. In fact, it was funny when Carl Gleba we're talking about, who you should try to get on your show. He's a great guy, another great guy. And it was funny when Carl pitched the whole idea to me. I'm like, I don't know, Carl, that's pretty huge. You're talking about writing 6 books by yourself. And then, we'll do some other stuff with it. And he's like, no, I just got all these great ideas. I want to do it. He did a bunch of the maps as well. And about halfway through the series, he's like, Kev, you're right. This was a huge undertaking. I should listen to you.
I always listen to Uncle Kevin.
I mean, to his credit, I mean, he delivered on all the books he had promised, and it's great. And then, the Heroes of Humanity book builds on that, and you're going to be seeing more. Disavowed touches on it. Antarctic, ironically, Antarctica, it may mention it, maybe some elements of that, but it's kind of separate from everything else that's going on, which kind of makes sense because it's so isolated, Antarctica.
Yeah, and a bunch of demons and devils might just like teleport there and be like, "Oh God, we made a mistake," and leave. No, not this.
Plus, they have to face down the war machines of the Penguin Confederation.
Oh my God, that needs to be a thing now.
I mean, I'm sorry. When it was announced that Rifts was doing an Antarctic book, my first mental image was an emperor penguin piloting a giant war robot, and I just have not been able to kick that idea.
And then you would literally be able to say, "It's penguins all the way down."
Yeah, plus penguin power armor.
Yes.
Ooh. Oh,
Yeah,
so is that a single penguin in power armor? Is it a power armor shaped like a penguin, or is it a power armor made of penguins? I'm game for any of these.
FYI, none of those things are in Antarctica.
I mean, I was quietly hoping for like uplifted penguins, but you know, I knew better than to really expect that.
Man-eating penguins.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. Well, the Antarctica 2.
Antarctica 2.
The
Penguin Boogaloo.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
Write that down.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of other things that we could ask, but we'd be diving way, way, way forward when this original series was about the early days.
Yeah.
So,
well, you mentioned before the show started you wanted to talk about the original Manhunter.
Oh, yeah.
1990 something.
Yeah. Rifts Manhunter from Myrmidon, I think it was. Yep. Was that your first licensee?
Certainly one of the early ones. We had a couple others that didn't quite pan out. No, so my very first license was with Dark Horse Miniatures. They did Dr. Farrell and the Terror Bears.
Yeah.
In the 1980s.
Okay.
And then Myrmidon was probably 2 or 3, or my second or third. I think it was more like the third license we had cut. And they, it was another local Michigan, Detroit guy. Seemed like a good guy. He wanted to do this space game and had some really good art for it and stuff, and wanted to do Rifts Manhunters. So like I said, I liked a lot of what he was doing. In fact, that's how I met Randy Post, was through Gary Sibley, who was the publisher of Myrmidon Press. And so they did that book, and I think it did decent for him. I think he thought it was his first step into, megadom, mega publishing, and like I said, it did, I think, pretty well for him, but some issues arose, and severed our ties with him and ended the license. But yeah, that's how I met Randy Post, was through Myrmidon. And it was a decent book. It's a space opera book, and much to my chagrin, I figured, gosh, Rifts Manhunters came out 20 years ago. I'm going to have the Coalition Manhunters. And I think a lot of people have missed that book because they go, oh, Manhunters, I already have that book. Or I hear it's space opera and I'm not into space opera. And it's like, no, Coalition Manhunters is a completely different book. It has nothing to do with Myrmidon Press's Rifts Manhunters. And in fact, I would dare to say that Coalition Manhunters is one of the best things I've written in years. I mean, there's just so much good material there about Coalition Society and their thought police, and more on dog boys and kill hounds, and There's 50 new psychic abilities that are not overpowered in the least. And there's just a lot of great stuff in that book that really gives you an idea of what the coalition is all about. And again, it sets up things where you've got new characters that could come into play in the Minion War and in the defense of the coalition and the coalition states. So it's an epic book, but I think between the title and the cover art, which is kind of confusing and misleading, I think we're actually thinking about retitling that book, and we're certainly going to get new art for the cover. We got Mike Majestic working on that right now. I just saw his type mock-up, and I approved it on Friday. It looks really good and is much more reflective of what's in the damn book.
Are we going to have foil covers?
Mm.
I wasn't planning it.
My collection must grow, Kevin. Yeah, it's a shame about Manhunters because it's a good book. It has some consistency problems, noticeably, but it's a good book. And Randy's art is just fantastic in it. Is it one of those licenses where we've talked about licenses before and how frequently concepts and things written will revert? How much of that do you own?
None of it.
Oh,
I didn't own any of it in that particular instance. So yeah, it's not ours, and it's just I think they printed 10,000 copies initially, so
yeah,
it's out there. You can find a copy at a reasonable price. They're out there.
Yeah, I remember.
But, yeah, it wasn't post art. There's a bunch of different good artists in that book.
Yeah, a bunch. But Randy's stuff stands like a cut above. It's just really good. Again, it's his use of black.
Yes.
In creative ways, he creates shadow. Just pop. He makes it pop. I know that word is so overused in art, but he makes his shadows pop.
Exactly.
Yeah. I remember the game had 2 previous editions, and they're not very good. I tried. Like when we got Manhunter to look at and talk about on the show, like, okay, I gotta go back and get the originals. They're not good. The story's components are there, but it was a terrible system. Sorry, writer of that game, if you're listening. It was bad. It was bad. I don't understand how people could have played it. Maybe they didn't. It was, yep. So the Palladium version was much better.
I think Myrmidon sold me on the fact that I felt close to Gary at the time, and I loved the art and I loved the concepts, and I agree it was not a particularly good game. So I think it mostly sold on the strength of the Rifts name and the beautiful art, starting with the cover. The cover was really sharp.
Yep.
And so Myrmidon's Manhunters was it was a weak product. But it still did, decent. And it's, one of those, when people find out about it, it's like one of those collector items that they're like, oh, I must own everything Rifts, and this was a licensed product, and maybe it wasn't so good, but I must own it.
I mean, I'm right here.
Yeah,
that's me.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's why we do the silvers and golds edition, foil editions, because you made the comment of, come on, Kev, I need more foil editions. And that's why we do them, because people want them.
Right.
So why not,
The red foils specifically are the most beautiful part for me. Like the red foil and the bestiary, the red foil and the fantasy anniversary edition. Beyond the Supernatural, I think, had yeah, so good.
Yeah, first edition rules. Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, part of it is red and black is just sort of a classic.
Yeah,
exactly.
They look really good together,
especially like that fantasy cover. But even the Rifts ones just are
fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking we can wrap this for now because My brain is already spinning in a completely different direction thanks to one word that was said earlier in this podcast. It's a word that begins with the letter N and ends with the words Eightbane.
Ah, okay. I was like, Engage?
No. The Engage is something that I think like it's a cautionary tale.
It's a cautionary tale.
But Nightbane.
Yes.
Nightbane's where I want to go next.
Ooh.
Sounds good to me.
Were we all down for that?
Yeah, we're down for that.
Okay. Well, Rifts. We've got Rifts, the original game, still out there. One of the longest existing science fiction games of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Savage Rifts out there that is just churning out these popular Kickstarters and these great products, bringing in new players. We've got more coming from the Minion War. What else? What else is bringing people to the table right now? Anything new that you can talk about?
I'm afraid not, but we do have a couple of epic things that are in the works.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, truly epic.
I'm excited. I'm very excited. Any last words, Jacob?
No, this has been great. Hearing the broader aspect of the publishing world and what goes into it, helps round out what it means to actually be a small games publisher. Small only in relative to the behemoths of the industry.
Well, in relation to Hasbro.
But yeah, no, this has been great and informative, and really helps fill in some of the pieces in the timeline for me. So.
Yeah. And
right.
Kevin, I want to say thanks for all of the books that you have published, but I also now, after having this conversation, another thanks for not selling it. I'm glad you still have the reins.
Oh yeah, me too. At one point Blizzard flew me in to talk about world building. That was in 2010, and even then they were like, "So what's it like to have been the guy in control of your vision for Rifts for 20 years?" And I'm like, "It's pretty damn good, right?"
Yeah.
And they made me realize that's a pretty rare thing to have the original creator control an IP for 20, 30 years. So I'm very lucky, very blessed, and I'm glad you guys and so many other people have enjoyed it for so many generations now.
And also, I just want to throw in another thanks there. Thank you for apparently not sleeping for over 20 years, because between your writing and the art for the books and the editing and then all of this periphery stuff, because having been involved in rights issues, do you have time to eat? I mean, like, do you just have an IV hooked up? What's going on?
It gets crazy sometimes, but it helps that I love what I do. And I've always been also pretty lucky with having really good people to help me realize my visions. Marianne, my ex-wife, she was a great partner for 20 years. And those were some of my most productive years because she was running the day-to-day business stuff quite astutely. And it gave me the time to sit down and just write my heart out, which I did. I was very prolific. And then I hope to get back to that again with Sean here, and we're looking at bringing a couple of other people on board. And if that works out, we're hoping that both Sean and I will have time to do more creative material.
All right.
Excellent.
Well, folks, thank you for listening to this. Please drop by our Discord and say hello. Please head over to Palladium Books and buy their books. And Kevin, thank you very much for joining us once again.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, good night, everybody, and we will catch you in our next conversation.
And remember to take a look at the Kickstarter.
Oh, that's right. Savage Rifts Europa Kickstarter happening right now. if you are listening to this when it launches.
Yes.
All right. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Adios.
You've been listening to The Glitterbois, a Palladium Books fan podcast. Glitterbois, Rifts, the Megaverse, and all other such topics are the property of Kevin Siembieda and Palladium Books. Please buy all their stuff and help keep them in print and making more games. You can order directly at palladiumbooks.com, and their entire catalog is available digitally at Drive-Thru RPG as well. Our opening music is 8-Bit Bass and Lead by Furby Guy from freesound.org. This closing music is Caravana by Philip Gross, available at freemusicarchive.org. All sound effects used are self-made or acquired via Creative Commons Zero license. If you like what you have heard, find us on Twitter and Facebook as The Glitterbois. That's BOIS. And check us out online at breakfastpuppies.com/glitterbois. And also join us on the Breakfast Puppies Network Discord at breakfastpuppies.com/discord. And if you want to help us out, please spread the word and help us build a community. Thanks again for listening. We'll catch you next time.